Hi everyone! I'm making this video to explain to you this assignment to spend 24 hours on the Noble Eightfold Path. Why are we asking you to do this? Well, because reading about Buddhism without ever practicing it is kind of like reading a recipe but never cooking the meal. It's interesting and educational to read about Buddhism, of course, but like everything else that you learn, experiential learning adds a whole nother dimension. You understand things on a different level through a little experience and practice. So you already know a little bit about the Eightfold Path. You read about it in this handout about Buddhist morality or Buddhist beliefs. So you know that it's all about how do you achieve a really good life. And most importantly, the aim of all of this really, as Buddhists say, it's to tame your mind, which is in many ways like a wild horse. And the Eightfold Path is to help you reach that self discipline and self control. If you think about it, like we learn how to control our physical selves from the moment that we're born. You learn how to walk, you learn how to, feed yourself. You learn all these things physically, but learning how to control your mind is a lifelong endeavor. And that's the Eightfold Path offers some advice about that, which is good no matter what your religious affiliation might be. Let me say a couple words about that too. That this is an exercise in cultural competence so that you can understand Buddhism. But here's a very important disclaimer. By doing this, we're not trying to get you to become Buddhist, right? Let's be clear about that. We're not trying to alter your own religious affiliation or passing judgment on anyone's religious beliefs. It's just a way to help you understand Buddhism a little bit better than just reading about it. So this Eightfold Path, it's sometimes called the middle way because it's a middle way between extremes. You know from the life of Siddhartha Gautama that he once had this great life as a prince, but he was really thrown for a loop when he first encountered, suffering in others. And that led him down a path of hardship and asceticism, which was the common thing for Hindu priests at the time. But he sort of settled somewhere in the middle. And he found that this is where you find true happiness and freedom from suffering. Okay, so like I said, it's your task to spend 24 hours on the Eightfold Path. It's an exercise in cultural competence. I'm going to ask you to do some before and after writing assignments, just like you did last year with the Stoic exercise. There will be some critical thinking measured here, and that's you elaborating on your experience that you have with thoughtful, interesting answers. Like, can you make your thinking visible? That's what I mean by critical and creative thinking. And communication skills, because you're going to have to write it. So is it clear, expressive writing? And can I tell that you have proofread what you turn into me? I'll look at the rubric here with you in a second. So the first part is a pre-flection instead of a reflection, because you're going to do it before your experience, and it needs to be before. So I'll be looking at the work that you do here, the timestamps on your work, to make sure that you are doing it how you're supposed to. So the first thing that you're going to do is choose two spokes of the Eightfold Path, right? Like two of the Eightfold Path spokes. And you're going to write a very brief paragraph in which you explain why do Buddhists do this in your own words, and why have you in particular chosen to follow them. I think that'll be really interesting. Okay, and then you're going to tell me when you are planning to do this. So why do you plan to do this during this time in particular? So there's an example here. Someone's choosing to do it on a day when they have a piano recital because it's going to be stressful, and they will have lots of chances to practice things like right effort and right emotions. And then, can you anticipate the experience? So write a brief paragraph before you do it, in which you consider the path that you've chosen and what difficulties you expect to encounter in doing that. Okay, so then you do it, right? And I would encourage you to keep some notes, maybe about some feelings or thoughts that you have as you experience it, but then reflection comes afterwards. Written in the day or so after your experience, while it's still fresh in your mind, write a descriptive paragraph. How did it go? What did you do to make this an authentic experience? What obstacles did you encounter? What is something that you learned about yourself or Buddhism or other religions? It doesn't really matter to me. Just can you reflect and say something about what you've learned there? And then third, how would following these elements of the Eightfold Path help unite people, right? That's the essential question of our unit, right? How does religion unite people? So, okay, apply that specifically to the Eightfold Path and say something. One interesting thing is plenty, okay? Um, let me go back to the spokes. So, what do you choose? What do you do? This is what I really want to dig into here. If you scroll down below, it will take you to a description of each of the elements of the Eightfold Path. And there's a link off to the side to another article in a Buddhist magazine. It's a very famous magazine called Tricycle Magazine, and you could read that if you want. Maybe that expresses these things in a different way that speaks to you, but I'm describing it below in ways that were meaningful to me. So let me explain it to you in my own way first. Well, first you can read this, right? Like some people spend their lives focused on benefiting themselves or people closest to themselves. Others are devoted to benefiting others, but sometimes at their own expense. Here's another way that Buddhism is the middle way, right? Like a wise person is someone who wants to benefit and wishes for the good of everyone, but also for themselves, right? Like it's a balance. Our lives are so interconnected that it is truly impossible to benefit others, to benefit oneself while harming others, right? If you do bad things to other people, you are also harming yourself. Intentionally harming others also takes a toll on the heart of the person who harms, right? So again, we're so interwoven that these things go hand in hand. We cannot be much of benefit to others if you neglect yourself. This is one thing I love about the Eightfold Path and feel like it's a really good message for middle schoolers, that it balances caring for yourself and others, and that it does involve being kind to yourself. So in all the messages here, also think about how that applies to your actions toward yourself. Okay, so steps 1 and steps 2, I don't think they're really necessarily doable things, because these are really kind of wisdom steps, right? Like if you follow all the other steps, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you will achieve step 1, which is right knowledge or right understanding, and you will have right thinking and emotion. But I feel like these are really hard ones to choose. I'll just go over them, but I'm going to kind of steer you away from choosing them. Step 1, right knowledge or understanding. It's also sometimes called right view. It just encourages you to accept the Four Noble Truths, right? That to accept the Buddha's teachings about life and death. That there is suffering in the world, and trying to see things clearly and fully and objectively. But knowing that you can change that suffering by following the Eightfold Path. What's my? Oh, yeah. There's a great line in the article that talks about the Eightfold Path being a way of achieving some self-discipline in your body, your word, your mind. It's a way of developing yourself, but it has nothing to do with belief or prayer or worship or ceremony, which you often associate with religion, right? The Eightfold Path is not really about that. It's like a self-improvement, an 8-step self-improvement plan. That's not really what you might associate with being religious. But it is a way to find peace and happiness in life. Step 2 is about right thinking or right emotion, and this just means cultivate positive emotions that will lead to less suffering for yourself and for others. So stop letting yourself be controlled by negative emotions. We all have these emotions every day: anger, hatred, jealousy, selfishness, and they're not productive. They don't help us feel good. So the correct emotions would include empathy, understanding how others feel, and compassion. Love and care, compassion for yourself and others. Okay, but steps 3 through 5 are really about good moral actions. Okay, so here's where you could really dig in and actually do something. Step 3 is right speech. That encourages you to avoid saying things that hurt other people or lead to negativity. You should only speak the truth. You should not lie. Try to say things that are helpful and positive. Don't say negative things about people, even behind their backs. Don't call people names. Don't lie. Exercise control to avoid blurting out impulsively or rudely. Don't use speech in a negative way. Okay, I will also point out that this applies to self-talk as well, right? So negative self-talk would also fall under this category of right speech. We do this all the time too, right? You say things to yourself about yourself that are hurtful. So one of your actions could be to try to avoid that. Okay, step 4, right conduct and action. This stage of the Eightfold Path requires you to live your life in a way that requires you to make good moral decisions. So you already know that Buddhists follow a set of rules to maintain good relationships and avoid causing harm. Those are called precepts. We read about the 5 precepts in your reading over there. It's 5 very specific rules about things that you should not do in order to live a good life, right? Whoops, wrong document. Buddhist monks and nuns have even more rules than that, like being vegetarian, living in kind of stark simplicity. Those are things that would go beyond. But the precepts are all about things you should not do, but you could also flip that around, and some Buddhists think about the positive sides of right action. That's like being kind and generous and respectful to people. Why do this, right? It's a source of happiness because it leads to a clear conscience. Step 5 is about right livelihood, and that is like how you make your living, right? Your livelihood is usually your job, your occupation. And this stage of the Eightfold Path requires you to earn a living in a way that does not go against Buddhist teachings, that will make you and others happy. So consider, like, do you enjoy your work? That would be right livelihood, choosing something that is positive and meaningful and satisfying, in which you find long-lasting, sustainable joy and meaning. So that's interesting. I know, like, you sit down to do your job right now is to be a student. So you sit down and do your homework. Do you find joy and satisfaction in that? Can you find a way to find joy and satisfaction in that? This one's interesting too. Furthermore, you should not support people or companies that violate Buddhist teachings. So in other words, you should not contribute to people who profit through greed or selfishness. You should buy only from companies that are honest and ethical in the way they treat their employees, their customers, or their competitors. You should ensure that you are giving your money to people who are aligned with Buddhist beliefs and teachings. So you might think about that, like, what is it that you buy or use that maybe does not align with Buddhist practices, and how might you not do that during your 24 hours? Okay, then we get to step 6 through 8, and those are not really about outward actions. They're more about inward discipline, right? Like mental discipline, control of your mind, which again, that's what makes these really hard. And you're going to have to be really mindful if you choose to practice these. So step 6, right effort, is keeping a positive attitude and approaching tasks with enthusiasm and cheerful determination. Don't be too intense in your work, but also don't slack off. You've got to be somewhere in the middle and avoid any kind of unwholesome or unhealthy thinking patterns. Positive thinking, helping others, not being greedy, not feeling hatred or stress or impatience. I like this. It's not a natural thing. This does not come naturally. So you really have to put effort into it. That's why it's called right effort, into overcoming these negative attitudes. And it's a practice. It's a daily practice. None of these things are things that you get there and it's like A+. These are things that Buddhists would practice continually throughout their lives until the very end, right? It's an ongoing practice. Step 7 is right awareness, or sometimes it's called mindfulness. And this is where you just have to be aware of your own mind. And we in the modern world are so bad at this because we all often are trying to multitask or do like a million things at once. And, time goes by and you're like, you don't even know what happened, right? The whole thing is a blur. For example, you might be eating in front of the TV. Have you ever done this and looked down and all of a sudden your plate's empty and you don't even remember eating? Right awareness means that you are fully present, that you are aware of where you are and what you are doing, and you're not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around you because you are kind of centered in the present. You should also be aware of others around you, both in your life and beyond. So for Buddhists, this is a way to really understand yourself and the world by being fully aware of the world around you, starting with yourself. Okay, and then step 8 is right concentration or meditation. I'm going to highly encourage this one for some people. It requires you to spend some time meditating. by meditating, you contemplate those around you and focus on achieving the middle path. It's really, I cannot say enough about how much this has been proven through even modern science to have positive health benefits for people by training your mind to be focused and calm and positive. Our minds are often agitated. I'm sure you've had this feeling where your mind is just jumping between things, like different feelings, like it's up and down, or emotions, or moods, or thoughts, like this or that, or like you're so scattered is the way I generally feel. By things, or you're constantly just reacting to things that are being thrown at you all day, and so you get off center, you don't feel stable. So when concentrated, your mind settles down and it stays centered and undistracted, and it provides some clarity and insight and wisdom. Taking time to concentrate and focus your mind takes a lot of practice. Buddhists spend hours and hours and hours doing this. There are lots of apps out there, great apps that you could use, which have like beginning meditations that you could do. But I'm linking up some here that I've tried and really like. The New York Times has a whole thing on meditation here, how to meditate. It's very practical. What to do when your mind wanders. Well, be kind to yourself. Know that your mind is going to wander. Here's like a 1 minute, a 4 minute, a 10-minute meditation. Depends on, how much you want to challenge yourself. Here's another one that a Harvard psychologist does to specialize in mindfulness. Here's one I love. It comes from a place called the Insight Meditation Center. It's up in Northern California, and they have a free 1 hour intro to meditation thing. So find an app, use one of these, doesn't matter, but that could be one of the things that you do. So those are, choose two, right? Choose two of those, and then I want to show you the rubric. It's just a simple, very Buddhist, simple rubric where here's what it means to be proficient. If you're there, I'll mark you there. Some of you will be above proficient, and I'll say why. There are lots of ways to be above proficient. There's lots of ways to be below proficient as well. Content knowledge, do you show that you understand something about the Eightfold Path? Critical and creative thinking, do you explain your thinking and really give specifics? Written communication, are you careful? Have you proofread? And skills with student, you follow directions. Okay, I want to just show you one example of student work here. So you get some sense of what's possible. So here's a student who last year chose to do right emotion and right action. And she explains why she's doing that, why Buddhists do that, and what was so striking to me is why she has chosen to do this. She says, because I believe they both influence each other. Feeling positive emotions can lead to practical actions. It's interesting, right? Like, things you feel on the inside can lead to things on the outside, and performing helpful actions can impact the way you feel. That's interesting too, right? Like doing things outwardly affects how you feel inwardly, and vice versa. These two things go together. It's a really interesting interplay. So she tells me why she's doing that, and why she's chosen those days. Here she anticipates it. She's like, I expect this to be hard because I usually tend to be hard on myself. And here I'm saying, yeah, that's sad. Like, oh, but Buddhism asks you to be kind to yourself. And she says it's hard for her to feel empathy and compassion for other people when she herself is experiencing negative emotions. That is a deep truth for everyone, right? It's hard for anyone to feel good about anything when you are experiencing negative emotions. It's hard for you to learn. It's hard. Your whole life is kind of blocked by negative emotions. Okay, so she anticipated it, and then she reflected. And she said she was going to try to avoid saying negative statements to herself, like really practice some positive self-talk. It didn't totally work out. She had a project where things started to go off the rails, and she got irritated and impatient. And here I'm just asking her, can you say a little bit more, like what happened? She said she really wasn't able to do it. It was a little hard for her. So down here, it's like, what is something that you learned? Well, she says, I learned that people will always encounter challenges. This is kind of an ongoing thing, but humans have a choice to choose the way that they react. That's kind of My comment here is that's so stoic. That's something we learned in seventh grade, but it's also reinforced by Buddhism. It's the same message. And then, what did she learn about the Eightfold Path there? So it's a really great exercise. I hope you learned something interesting about yourself, about Buddhism, about your own mind, about learning in general from this experience. It could be anything as long as you express it in ways that are clear and honest and authentic. I hope you enjoy it.